Welcome to the Sustainability in Wine Country online series hosted by Cork and Fork in Logan Circle, Washington, D.C. My name is Antoinette Landejong, and it is a pleasure to be with you today. This is the third masterclass in a growing series of classes focusing on sustainability in viticulture. Excuse me. We will start this class with a brief introduction, followed by our guest speaker's presentation, and end with a brief Q&A. We will do our best to answer questions not addressed during the presentation in an email summary after the event. The first masterclass of this series addressed the efforts made by New Zealand wine growers and their sustainability movement. We then heard from the Lodi Rules team and Dr. Stephanie Bolton. Today, we are honored to host our guest speaker, Laurel Marcus, Executive Director of the California Land Stewardship Institute. Laurel Marcus serves as Executive Director of the California Land Stewardship Institute. She wrote the Fish-Friendly Farming Environmental Certification Program in 1999 as a collaborative effort between growers, environmentalists, and regulatory agencies. Laurel has over 30 years of experience in the acquisition of lands, environmental assessment and project design, preparation of CEQA documents, the negotiation of permits, public relations and communications, development of feasibility analyses for project development, public outreach and education programs, and project implementation and monitoring. As part of the FFF program, Laurel interfaces with numerous farmers and ranchers to prepare and review farm plans for certification, design and implement projects and cost share agreements, listen to farmers and ranchers and develop workshops, projects, and other types of educational and project opportunities. She has directed the work of a number of advisory groups involved in complex natural resource projects. Laurel has worked closely with the NRCS over the past few years to implement an AWEP grant for water infrastructure in the Russian River watershed. Laurel has spent the last few years also discussing this ecosystem service market project with a variety of farming and ranching interests in order to focus the effort to benefit this group. She has also overseen several large fish migration barrier removal projects. Laurel, what a biography. We are so excited to introduce you, the viewers, to Laurel and to begin this presentation. Thank you to all viewing for being a part of the Sustainability in Wine Country series. We hope you enjoy it. Laurel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Antoinette. I'm going to pull up my presentation. Let's see if we'll do that. There we go. Well, thank you for that great introduction. Let's just jump right in and I'll tell you all about fish-friendly farming. So our program is from the late 1990s. And it started in Sonoma and Mendocino County with a group of wine grape growers. And they wanted to have a program that addressed all of the federal, state environmental regulations and helped them to understand what practices they were supposed to use and how they could comply with these regulations. If you've ever read a regulation, you can understand why they would feel this way. The fish-friendly farming program is science-based. And it incorporates all of these different federal and state laws, including the Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, water rights laws, Fish and Game Code, pesticide regulations. And we have also included labor and human resources laws and requirements. We go beyond just these regulatory requirements. And as I'll show you, we implement a lot of environmental and social improvements through our certification. So everyone kind of stumbles over the words fish-friendly farming. So why do we have that cumbersome term in our program? Well, it's because these fish, the salmon and trout, are really a symbol of a clean and healthy environment. They live in the creeks amongst all the farmland in the Sonoma, Mendocino, and Napa areas. So they're a part of that landscape. And if we can manage farmland well enough that we can maintain these fish, then we have really met a very high bar for sustainability. Now, just in case you don't know about these fish, this is their life cycle, and it's quite complicated. They start out in the ocean as adults, they come up the stream, they have to spawn in a little tiny creek, typically where they were born. Those eggs have to incubate, the little fish come up through the rocks, and for most of the salmon and steelhead, they stay in the creek for a year. And then in the spring, they turn silver and they go out into the ocean to return as an adult. So we look at all the requirements for this life cycle, and we make agricultural operations compatible with what the fish needs. So here on the left, you see this shady, nice creek where you're going to find salmon and steelhead, and that's the good picture. And then over here on the right, this is the bad picture, the one that's got way too much eroded soil in it, and it's not going to support any fish. So we're going to work with farms to avoid the picture on the right and create the picture on the left. So what is it we do and where do we do it? Well, first of all, the where. So we began in Mendocino and Sonoma, and then we started in Napa Valley in 2002, Solano County 2005, the Sierra Foothills in 2008, and our Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta in 2020. We have over 200,000 acres enrolled, made up of over 1,200 individual farms. We've assessed and improved 960 miles of dirt roads, and I'll explain the significance of that later, 451 miles of blue line creeks and river corridors, and many more miles of ephemeral creeks. For example, Napa County, which has been in the program since 2002, we have 95% of all the vineyards in the county in the fish-friendly farming program. We also have a ranching program that has over 60,000 acres. What our organization does, this is not a self-assessment program. We provide professional one-on-one technical assistance to inventory and assess all the features of the site. Then we produce a thorough, comprehensive farm plan with a number of maps, and I'll show you some examples of that. Now, of course, we do certify wine grape vineyards. We actually also certify table grape vineyards, fruit and nut orchards, row crops, grazing land, and most recently, cannabis. So, to relate this to the consumer, here is a picture of all of the wineries who have all of their property in our program. And I would take me like 5 different slides of this size with these little small trademarks on it to get all of the wineries that are involved in this. So it's very extensive and a lot of people are involved. Okay, so here's a little map showing you where we are. As you can see, there's a lot of people over here. This is Napa and Sonoma valleys. This is our foothills area, much smaller farms. And then this is the Russian River over here and Anderson Valley over here. Now, one point I did want to make is that in Napa, there's another program called Napa Green Land. And it basically claims its certification for everything that we certify. We don't really care for that, but they don't really have a certification program, and this is what they do. So just remember, when you see Napa Green, it's really us that is doing all the certification and all of the documentation. Okay, so this is what a fish-friendly farming plan has in it. It's impossible for me to go through all of this in detail. Plus, I would probably bore everyone to death. But I'm going to cover very briefly the things that are outlined in red. Okay, so managing the vineyard. You know, I love pictures like this where the vineyard is just integrated into this beautiful rural landscape. And in so many ways, it just makes a lot of sense in California because our wine grapes are a low water use crop. They don't require a lot of land disturbance, and they just kind of fit right in with the surroundings. Now, because we're worried about water quality and fish, we're going to take a great big look at every property for the amount of sediment that's eroding off the land. And this is not just in the vineyard. Of course, we pay attention to that. It's in the streams, it's in the roads, it's in all parts of the property. So we go over the entire parcel that the vineyard is on, not just the vineyard. So here you can see the kind of things we like to see in vineyards. These are cover crops. A cover crop is simply a grass, or sometimes it'll be a legume and grass seed crop that's put in between the rows of vines. So it protects all of the soil. When you look at these pictures here, this one and this one, you can see that there's no dirt. You don't see any bare dirt. And that means that it's primarily protected by all the grass. Over here, we have a creek. Here's our little vineyard. We encourage the growth of grass between the creek and the vineyard so that if any dirt comes off the vineyard, it can get caught in the grass and doesn't get in the creek. Same with various winterization practices. So these are steep vineyards. And here you can see they've put in a drainage system, and they've put in some straw wattles to direct the water into the drainage system. Over here, we have the winterization of roads with straw. That keeps the dirt out of everything. And here's just a few more practices that growers might use. And then at every place where we find a pipe, we check to make sure there's rocks at the outlet of the pipe so it's not eroding. So you get the idea here. This is very detailed and thorough. And these are just some of the maps that we make. This is the slope. So steeper things erode more than flatter things. This is their soil type. And this is their drainage system. So each one of the circles is a drop inlet into a pipe, and the X's are the outlets. So we want to make sure that this is all functioning well and that there's no erosion at any of the X's, at any of the outlets. Now, we're also going to look at features of the vineyard involving chemical storage, where they mix and load their chemicals, how they apply their chemicals, and the toxicity of the chemicals they're using. So we encourage integrated pest management. That means that you're trying to keep a number of beneficial insects or natural enemy insects in your vineyard so they can eat the insects that you don't like. That you always monitor that you don't use broad spectrum insecticides, and that you use a targeted and as low an amount of chemicals as you can. Many vineyards don't use very much chemical because they have enough natural diversity around them, and they keep things like this. This is an insectary row in the vineyard where it can maintain a refuge for beneficial insects. These are some of our beneficials: ladybugs, spiders, minute pirate bugs. They have kind of fun. Another one is an assassin bug. They have great names. So we look at the storage, the mix and load, and the application methods to make sure nothing is going to run off into a well or into a creek. And then this is the kind of data we use for determining toxicity. We look at whether a chemical has high, low, medium, or extremely high toxicity to different types of creatures: mammals, birds, fish, aquatic invertebrates, and we also look at honeybees. We look at its persistence in soil. You may not want to have a buildup of certain things in your soil. And then also whether it's likely to leach and contaminate groundwater. If we find a grower using a lot of broad spectrum, highly toxic materials, we work with them on suggesting alternatives that they could use. Because right now there's lots of different kinds of products that are newer that allow you to address a pest problem without necessarily affecting other insects or causing a material to go into a creek. We also work on water conservation. All the vineyards I see use drip irrigation, which is the most efficient form of irrigation. And then we encourage them to use systems like this. These are soil moisture monitoring devices that feed into a little box over here that you can download. You can also get it to go to your phone. So you can see 4 feet down how much water is still in the soil. So you don't irrigate if the roots are still have enough moisture. We also look at water supply. We're the only certification program that requires that your water rights be in order and that you have a functioning fish screen on any diversion. Okay, so that's all the vineyard section. Now I'm going to quickly go through the roads. Roads are the biggest source of sediment, and there's roads everywhere. Some of them are new, some of them are, you know, from a time when maybe they were doing logging. But as you can see from these pictures, you end up with gravel that no fish can use, highly turbid water, and a road that isn't particularly easy to drive. So I take a lot of my pictures in public parks because they tend to not do very much maintenance on their roads. So here you can see how this road has not been maintained, and it's got these rills, and it's all going to go right into the creek. That's not what we want. We also look at all the culverts, you know, the crossings, making sure that they will not blow out in a large storm. And here's just an example of a project that we did with Navarro Vineyards, if you're familiar with them. They had this old road that you can see how much it was eroding. We regraded it into an outsloped road, and that is considered the environmentally preferred option, and they now love that road more than anything. We do map all the roads, and we map all the creek crossings. So here's an example of a site that's very large and very complicated. And so you can see the kind of detail that goes into these plans. As part of the plan, any crossing that's not large enough or not put in properly has to be repaired. Here's a much simpler one with just one road crossing. Now, we wouldn't be complete if we didn't look at creeks and rivers in detail. So we break creeks into those that are in canyons are called confined channels, and those that are out on a floodplain called unconfined channels. This makes lots of sense if you think about it. You can see here a confined channel. It's like down in a canyon or a gulch, and it has certain things that can cause problems like creek crossings or landslides. Whereas this is more typical kind of creek. This is an unconfined creek. It usually is in a big valley. It's what most agricultural land is near. And so what we do is we want to make sure that the riparian corridor, which is all these trees here, is wide enough that it forms a good buffer between the river or the creek and the agricultural land. And of course, riparian ecosystems, very important for a large number of birds and mammals, including this cute little river otter here, and of course the fish. So this is one of the ecosystems that we work very closely with growers to try to manage, make it, you know, a larger part of their property and make sure that it's biodiverse and in good function. And, you know, here's a place, this is a winery, and they have a wetland, a vernal pool, which is a kind of wetland. They have this creek going through it. You know, this has got a lot of biodiversity on it, all of these hill properties up here. So it's in good balance. It has vineyard, it has buildings, but it also has a lot of habitat. And here's another one. Okay, so certification is part of every certification program. So how do we do ours? Well, we use regulatory agencies. So we have a completely independent, objective group of people who are scientists and understand the program. They have to go through a little bit of training so they understand what to look at. They read the farm plan for its accuracy and its completeness. For the BMPs, which is a common acronym that means best management practices, and to make sure that the ones that are specified in the plan are those that are needed and the timeline for their implementation. Then they visit the site to check the accuracy of everything and that the need for improvements is correctly defined. Once they review everything, they issue a certification letter to us, and then we issue a certificate. The grower has to do an annual online audit and get recertified every 5 years. We have a certification policy that if you violate it, you can lose your certification. So we have lots of rules. And as I was saying at the beginning, we wanted to provide regulatory compliance. So our certification is one of the only ones that does this. So a grower can be in compliance with Clean Water Act permits and be sustainable under the same certification. Okay, I just wanted to show you some of the projects we've done. This is in Napa. We did invasive non-native plant removal projects on 26 miles of creek and river channels. This is all done in a collaborative fashion with the grower and with like Fish and Wildlife Service. Invasive non-native plants invade riparian areas and they keep the native plants from growing, and they often don't support wildlife very well. So eucalyptus is one that many people may know. It's very common in California. It burns pretty hot too, so that's a bad side to it. So we get rid of it and then we replant. All these little grow tubes down here are native oaks and different kinds of shrubs. This is a big restoration project that we did on 9 miles of the river, and then also the Calistoga section of the Napa River. We designed all of it, worked with the landowners, and it is now in the implementation phase. Here's a big project from Mendocino County, where we took what was basically a hayfield and we dug it up. We put the dirt here so they could plant some more vineyard, and we created a riparian slough. So here it is, hayfield. We graded it, we planted it, and now it looks like this. So again, quite a bit of habitat recreation. Many of you might buy wine from the Carneros region. Well, we work on Carneros Creek, which has a lot of very tall banks that like to erode. And so this program works on setting them back and revegetating them. We work very specifically on water projects. Antoinette mentioned the AWEP program in her introduction, and that's what this is. We worked with the federal government to build a lot of these ponds so that we could reduce conflicts between water diversions and fish in the Russian River. We've also worked very closely at getting municipal recycled water out to farmers. This has been very important this year where we have so little water in California. And we have a new program in the Delta where we're going to be certifying cherries, wine grapes, almonds, walnuts, pears, alfalfa, corn, small grains, tomatoes, and irrigated pasture. So the Delta is the heart of agriculture in California. So we're very excited to be working on that. A few more examples of projects. Napa County, as many of you may know, has had devastating fires, the 2020 fire particularly. So we've been able to get about $1 million to do post-fire recovery. And this addresses all sorts of different drainage improvements, road improvements, revegetation of creeks, again, in collaboration with all of the growers you see here marked out on this map. Finally, a little bit about our new certification for climate. We're doing this through a pilot program with the Sonoma County wine growers. And it's too hard to really explain in detail. It's like its own presentation. But as you can see from our little diagram here, agriculture is only 8% of all the emissions in California. But it has an opportunity to possibly sequester carbon and mitigate a lot of the transportation, industrial, and power generation emissions. Our growers are really interested in working on this. They like flexibility, however. So we are not imposing a no-till requirement on the program. We're going partial tillage. But this is going to be coming up in the years ahead. And then I think this is my last slide. This is just, again, to encourage you to buy wine that comes from all of these wonderful people. When I look at these names, I think about the guy that's out there growing the grapes for the wine and how much I like them. And yeah, so I'm happy to take questions. Yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks so much, Laurel. I can't wait to rewatch your presentation. I'm sure I'll be pausing quite a bit to review all of the information on the slides. Thank you for that incredible presentation. We do have a couple of questions. The first one is, what does sustainable viticulture look like 10 years from now, from your perspective?
Well, I think that the climate portion of sustainable viticulture is what's going to become a much bigger story. As I sort of alluded to a minute ago, farmers have the potential to really be the heroes because they can sequester carbon in the soil of the vineyard and of course in the vines themselves, as well as some of those maps you saw, these large areas of habitat. They can put in woody plants for hedgerows. They can plant native species. There's lots of different things they can do that will help to take more carbon dioxide out of the air and sequester it into the plants. So I believe that that will be the next big step for viticulture.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And over the past decade, sustainable viticulture has seemingly taken root throughout the world. As a result, the global market is now flooded with standards varying by country, region, and even different farming plots. What are the key factors that you considered in choosing the right standards for fish-friendly farming?
Well, I'm a scientist by background, so we're really using scientific protocols. So we have an assessment that's done by professionals looking at all the sediment sources, all the possibilities of getting chemicals into the water, and habitats and roads and all these things. We don't use self-assessments very much because we found that the farmers don't like doing them for anything outside the vineyard. So we do the farm plan with them, they review it, we make sure it's all correct, and then it goes for certification. So I would say our principles are really using science and a objective, comprehensive assessment of the property.
Excellent, thank you. And I would like to ask a question on my own behalf, which is less of a question and more of a request. If you could sort of shed some more light on what the regulatory process is. How does that work between you and the government?
Yeah, well, we kind of act between the grower and the government agencies. Right now, if you sign up for our program in Napa, Sonoma, and soon Mendocino, they're working on that permit, and you go through our process and you get certified, you are in compliance with these laws. So we've taken a lot of the stress of complying with pretty complex regulations out of the grower's life. And so they, now talk to us as a third party instead of having to talk directly to the government people. So it's a more comfortable situation for them. From our side, we have to deal with the regulators. We, build relationships with them and an understanding. Okay, here's how we're interpreting these sentences that you have in your permit. Please tell me that that's correct or incorrect. So we're constantly checking in with them to make sure that we're doing what they're expecting of us when we're working with growers. So there's no misunderstandings, and that the growers can continue their livelihoods and they're benefiting the environment as the government wants them to.
Wonderful. Laurel, I have so many more questions, but I respect your time very much and we are very appreciative of the time you've already spent with us this evening, but certainly I hope our paths will cross again and I'll be able to bombard you with all of the questions that I have about your incredible program and the amazing work you do. Thanks again for your time and for hosting this presentation. Thank you to all for viewing this live or viewing the recording. For those who are with us live, we look forward to featuring our next Sustainability in Wine Country event next week with Wine Australia and Marty Longbottom. We thank you so much. Please view more events on our website at www.corkandfork.co. Thank you again for joining us. Take care, everyone. Laurel, hope to meet you soon. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Take care.